Just a few weeks back, Ducati unveiled the long-anticipated V4 version of their super popular sports adventure tourer, the Multistrada, and it looks pretty amazing on paper. It has bags of power, top-notch equipment, and some new tech features which are basically unrivaled in the adventure market. So in today's video, we're going to see how it stacks up against the benchmark in this category, the BMW R1250 GS. It's been a bestseller for many years and for good reason, with a characterful, torquey boxer twin engine, loads of techie features, and BMW's signature telelever suspension and paralever shaft. So does the GS still hold the crown, or does the Multi V4 have what it takes to become the best adventure bike on the market? We'll go over the specs and find out. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more head-to-heads like this, as well as the latest motorcycle news and reviews, then please do remember to hit subscribe. The V4 Gran Turismo engine used in the Multistrada is a massive deal for Ducati. For many years they've used desmodromic valves, which open and close with cams and rockers, offering a more accurate valve timing at high revs. They're a bit pricey to service though, and for a high mileage tourer like the Multistrada, that can become a real pain. So the Multi V4 now uses spring actuated valve closure, much like you'd see on most other motorcycle engines, and as a result has massively improved valve adjustment intervals of 60,000 kilometers or 37,000 miles. It's not really at the expense of performance though. Yes, the V4 Gran Turismo is down on power versus the V4 in the Panigale that it's derived from, but it's still good for 170 horsepower at 10,500 RPM and 125 Newton meters of peak torque at 8,750, which is exceptional in this class of bike. Not only is it a 10 horsepower increase on the previous generation Multistrada 1260's V-twin, but the new engine is also more compact, allowing Ducati to optimize its position in the chassis for better balance, and it's 1.2 kilograms lighter too. And that's despite adding rotating mass compared to the Panigale's V4 to give it more of a sensation of low down torque. It does, however, retain the Panigale's counter-rotating crank, which works against the gyroscopic effect of the wheels to improve agility, as well as the twin pulse firing order that gives this V4 engine its own distinctive sound. And there's one last feature worth touching on, and that's rear cylinder deactivation. The Panigale is well known for roasting your spuds given how close the rear cylinder bank is to the seat, and that could become even more problematic on a bike that's intended to spend more time in urban traffic where the cooling effects of moving air are reduced. That's why the rear two cylinders of the V4 Gran Turismo stop firing at a standstill, whilst the front two cylinders keep the engine spinning, ready to go instantly as soon as the throttle is applied. Now, it's not a new concept, with some big American V-twin cruisers using the same idea, but it makes a lot of sense to apply it here. The GS, on the other hand, uses BMW's famous flat boxer twin configuration, which is one of its best known features. This modern version in the 1250 GS is air and liquid cooled, and also gets their shift cam technology. Essentially, there are two cams per valve on the intake side, and an electronically actuated shift gate slides the camshaft between the two profiles based on throttle position. In practice, this means that when the throttle is moderate, a less aggressive cam and therefore valve lift and timing results in better fuel economy and smooth delivery. Give it some beans though, and the shift cam will move over to a more aggressive cam profile that prioritizes out-and-out performance. Power is still down on the Ducati though, with the boxer twin unable to compete with the reviness of the V4, and so a peak of 136 horsepower occurs much lower down at 7,750 RPM. But where the BMW's strength lies is in its torque, with a beefy 143 Newton meters delivered lower down at 6,250 RPM. And that's essentially the crux of the difference between these two engines. If you want a revvy V4 derived from a superbike, then of course go for the Multistrada. You'll get about 35 more horsepower at the top end, and it'll almost certainly better suit a rider who likes to push it on the road. If, on the other hand, you want the gutsy, torquey delivery of a twin, then look no further than the GS, with almost 20 more Newton meters delivered 2,500 RPM lower in the revs. There's a good reason they call it a tractor. The layout of the Boxer Twin also helps to keep its weight low, which is a contributing factor to the GS's renowned stability. The engine is load-bearing with a 2-section frame built around it, and the whole lot is suspended on forks that you won't find on many other manufacturers' bikes. BMW have used this telelever design for some time, with a monoshock mounted to an arm that joins the frame and forks, as opposed to the springs being contained inside as with a traditional telescopic fork. The benefit of doing so is that steering and damping forces are separated, resulting in a better feel at the front end, as well as lower unsprung weight, improving the responsiveness of the suspension and less fork dive under heavy braking. At the rear there's a shaft drive, which of course has the benefit of zero chain maintenance, which might be especially valuable if you're doing a lot of riding in varying weather conditions. A power lever minimises the effects of shaft jacking, which is essentially the drive shaft causing the back end of the bike to sit up under acceleration, and a monoshock takes care of suspension duties. Braking comes in the form of BMW's own branded Hayes-produced radially mounted 4-pot calipers on 305mm disc at the front, and a single 2-pot caliper on a 276mm disc at the rear. The whole package weighs in at a fairly substantial 249 kilograms wet and about 20 kilograms more for the Adventure version. The Multistrada, on the other hand, is a touch more slender, ranging from 240 to 243 kilograms wet across the various models. But as well as ditching the desmodromic valves for this Multistrada V4, they also did away with a couple of other signature design features in the trellis frame and the single-sided swing arm of the 1260. There's now an aluminium monocoque frame, which they say is 4 kilograms lighter than the outgoing steel trellis, and an aluminium double-sided swing arm that's also lighter and has improved rigidity. There's still a little Italian flair on show with the trellis in the subframe, but overall it has to be said that performance has been prioritised over styling, and depending on your personal taste, that could well be a good thing or a bad thing. Braking ought to be bang up to scratch though, with Brembo's radially mounted monoblock M4.32 calipers on 320mm discs on the base Multistrada V4, or top spec Stylema calipers on 330mm discs on the V4 S. The base V4 comes with Marzocchi's fully adjustable upside down fork and a fully adjustable monoshock at the rear, but if you cough up for the V4 S, you get electronic semi-active suspension with Ducati's Skyhook algorithm. This works on the idea that the bike is suspended on a hook from the sky, and the electronic suspension reacts to the road surface in order to keep the bike at a constant vertical position, resulting in a super smooth ride. It also has an auto leveling function, which detects the effects of luggage and/or a passenger to automatically adjust preload accordingly, ensuring that the bike sits level on the road. The GS can pretty much match it though, with their own electronic dynamic ESA system available on the more premium TE model. This system also adjusts damping according to the road condition, riding style, and current riding mode. In fact, both bikes match each other like for like in many of the technical features, with both of them having a TFT dash, plenty of riding modes, cornering ABS, traction control, hill hold control, quick shifters, keyless ignition, and many more. But the big differentiator here is the Multistrada V4's radar-enabled adaptive cruise control system and blind spot detection. A front-facing radar allows you to switch on the cruise control and choose from 4 distance settings to enable the bike to follow the traffic in front, varying speed as appropriate. Now, I know that not everybody likes loads of tech on their bikes, but having used a few cars with this system, I personally think it's a game changer in terms of long-distance motorway comfort and safety. A rear-facing radar enables the blind spot detection, which illuminates an LED light on the edge of the rear-view mirrors to warn the rider of vehicles approaching them from behind. It also warns of vehicles approaching directly behind at high speeds, and again, although this isn't a replacement for good riding, I can only see it being a good thing. Now, BMW do have their own front-facing adaptive cruise control system, which can rival the features of the Ducati, but at the moment it's only available on their R1250 RT Tourer, so it'll most likely be next year before we see it on the GS now that their launch season is over. On top of that, there's no mention of a rear-facing radar in the works, so we may not see blind spot detection for some time either. Yes, the GS has a few other features here and there, but the radar-enabled cruise control and blind spot detection will have such a huge impact on the riding experience on the motorway that you have to give this one to the Ducati. Looks aren't important for everyone, but I ran a poll here on YouTube a few weeks ago, and it's certainly a factor for many of you. The Multistrada V4 may not have some of those classic Ducati features anymore, but I still think it's a great looking bike, especially from the side. It's got such a huge bulk to the front and midsection, and a long but relatively slender swing arm, and it gives it a really aggressive hunched over look. Especially with the spoke wheels and knobbly tyres, I think it looks the nuts. Front on, the headlights don't quite do it for me, but I suppose they're in keeping with Ducati's other bikes like the Panigale and Street Fighter, and they have to have some consistency in their design. These more swooping lines give it some functionality as well, with a lot of work in the wind tunnel going into making the ride exceptionally quiet, whilst also directing heat from the engine away from the rider's legs. The GS on the other hand, well, it's a GS. It looks big, rugged and more squared off. There are some particularly tasty paint options for 2021, with the 40th anniversary edition harking back to the R100 GS of the 80s, and the red, blue and white rally option always looking good to me. As for price, the Multistrada V4 starts at £15,495, with the S model including electronic suspension, cornering lights, a bigger dash, better brakes, keyless ignition, a quick shifter, cruise control and hill start control at £18,395. The range-topping S Sport gets its own snazzy paint job, and a Kropovich slip-on and a carbon front mudguard on top of the specs of the V4 S, and that starts from £19,995. It's worth adding that you'll need to add at least the £2,000 travel and radar kit to the V4 S to access the radar-enabled adaptive cruise control. It's not available as an option for the base V4. The GS has a more accessible starting price, with the regular R1250 GS starting from £13,705, whilst the TE adds more riding modes, a quick shifter, an adaptive headlight, pannier fastenings, handguards, heated grips, cruise control, keyless ignition, LED indicators and more, and starts at £16,945. There's also the GS Adventure at £14,985, which is geared more towards long distance and off-roading, with a larger tank, spoked wheels, more suspension travel and crash protection as standard. The GS Adventure TE is the most expensive model on offer and basically combines the features of the GS Adventure and the GS TE, starting from $18,410. It's pretty tricky to compare these two bikes on price, as the specs vary so much as you work your way up through the ranges, and there are still numerous accessories you can add on. But on the face of it, the base GS looks like good value if you just want the fundamental mechanical foundation upon which the rest of the tech is built. So given all that, I'd love to hear which bike you'd go for in the comments below. I'm super keen to try out the adaptive cruise control on the Multi V4, but it would push the total price of the bike up over the 20 grand mark, which is way out of reach for most of us. But let me know which is your pick, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.